started all the way back in 2016 when I was a student journalist at Portland State University. And that was the first time I came face to face with these marauding gangs of thugs dressed in the black uniforms and carrying weapons. They started fires. That was in November of 2016 in reaction to Donald Trump winning the election then. And we had 3 days of rioting. And then, of course, over the next 4 years, that violence continued to escalate. And in 2019, that violence came was literally directly targeted at me when they beat me severely on the streets of downtown Portland. I had a brain hemorrhage. There were no arrests over that. And ever since then, they've been trying to finish what they started. They've been threatening to kill me for months on end now. They've released my address. They showed up to my home, and all of which have been reported to law enforcement and, when applicable, also the FBI, and nothing was done. And so I've really been on borrowed time in Portland, and it was important for me to be there to cover the extreme violence that happened throughout last year and still ongoing now. But it's come to a point now where I am not safe there, and I cannot rely on the local authorities for basic protection.
Tell me about what that was like, though, before potentially you were so recognizable. Did they sort of identify you among their members? Did they let other people know? Did they try to knock the camera out of your hands from recording? What happened?
So it escalated. Initially, it was blocking me, preventing me from doing my duties as a journalist in the public space. And they were doing that in plain sight of law enforcement, even though this was criminal harassment. Nothing was done. And they kept picking it up, and then it was throwing stuff at me eventually. Then it led to them punching me repeatedly in the face and head and stealing my camera equipment. I think, but, you know, it hasn't just been me who's been victimized. I continue to do what I do, even despite the threats, because there's been countless number of people who have been beaten, injured, or even killed by adherents of this extremist ideology. And those people have had no voice. And in fact, actually, the media would frequently turn the victim into the aggressor and make these people out to be at fault, as they did to me after I was beaten.
I know you've got, of course, the book. We showed it at the top of this segment here. And I've also heard that that's caused quite a controversy in the Pacific Northwest as well, with it just being on book stands. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the largest independent bookstore in Portland, and I believe it's the largest independent bookstore in the world, announced that they would not sell it unmasked on its shelves after Antifa harassed them and showed up, forced the business to shut down for a couple of days. There was violence outside its flagship downtown store. So this is the contemporary day version of book burning. And what's sad is that, what I'm thankful for, and despite all of that, is that a lot of people ended up hearing about Unmasked through the acts of what these extremists were doing, trying to get my book censored. So I'm very thankful that they've turned Unmasked now into a potential bestseller. I know Amazon has sold out. Hopefully it will get restocked very soon. But Unmasked is very important, and I hope that the American public and elected officials, law enforcement, recognize that we're dealing with a homegrown domestic terrorist entity that is masquerading as a social justice movement, as an anti-fascist movement, when by their own actions, they are bringing explosives and guns and knives to their riots. They claim and siege territory and say they don't recognize American jurisprudence. They set fires to buildings where people are inside. All of this has been done with looks like the coddling and blessing of many in legacy media and even elected officials on the left.
Right. Yeah, you wonder where the outcry is, especially when you see this violence and destruction in American cities, police precincts being burned as well, businesses destroyed, something you would expect our elected leaders to speak out about and not just identify as an idea, because as we know, an idea cannot cause destruction like we're seeing. But I want to talk to you about the continued efforts of this group, because even after President Biden was sworn in, there were dozens of protesters who were marching in the Seattle area demanding the abolition of immigration and customs enforcement. Are you surprised that this movement is continuing on again during a Biden administration? We knew these group members were no fans of President Trump. Did you anticipate something to sort of slow down once Joe Biden became president?
No, I know a lot of people thought that, oh, Biden won in November, Antifa is going to fade away. No, if you read their literature, they're calling for the abolishment in the United States. And for several years, they did become sort of informal allies with mainstream Democrats in that they had a shared mutual hatred in the former administration, the former president. But that was always a pretext, this excuse that they used to say that they were opposing a fascist regime. It was a lie. It was just used to mainstream their arguments. And unfortunately, the Democrats played along and fed and nursed what I view as a monster, a beast. And now it's too big to slay, and it's come back to hurt them, actually. So, for example, there have been probably around a dozen riots in the Pacific Northwest since it was known that Biden won. These are people who hold banners that say things like, we don't want Biden, we want revenge. And they have an image of a Kalashnikov rifle on it. They want to kill other American citizens. They want to burn down courthouses, police departments. All they want to do is destroy. They don't believe they don't believe they can establish their so-called utopia until America is abolished.
So this is still going. It's still going on as you're describing. And I just want to play for our viewers the response from the Biden press secretary about what the administration thinks about Antifa and all that's going on. Here's what she said.
Why haven't we heard anything directly from him about the riots in Portland and the Pacific Northwest since he was inaugurated?
Well, he's taking questions later this afternoon, so perhaps you will. I will say from here that President Biden condemns violence and any violence in the strongest possible terms. Peaceful protests are a cornerstone of our democracy.
Again, sort of reading off a scripted response there, condemning violence, will admit that. But Andy, clearly you are a victim of the violence there, and I'll ask you, is that a sufficient response from the press secretary, from the White House, and do you feel safe where you are right now?
I mean, she's just out here platitudes. The Biden administration had very strong words, rightfully, to say about domestic terrorism, and they focused it particularly on the right and casting a very wide net over Trump supporters. When it came time to also call out the domestic terroristic acts of Antifa and their allies in BLM, you see that they use sort of these mealy-mouthed platitudes that are not very specific. Regarding do I feel safe in America, I don't feel safe in American cities. I mean, you can actually look at the data of all the skyrocketing crime in not just my city of Portland, but others as well, because one of the really consequences that can be felt of this political violence by the far left last year is that police departments have had their budgets cut immensely. Officers have left in droves. And normal people, taxpayers, are the ones left to suffer, to pick up the pieces because of weak leadership.
Really quick for you, Andy, will you keep covering and reporting on Antifa movements?
I am. I'm continuing because I realize the efforts to get my book banned and censored just show how much they're afraid of me and the work that I've done and the work that I still have to do.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.